Hi, and welcome to this presentation on cloud compliance and assurance. My name is Andres Silva. I'm a Principal Specialist Solutions Architect with the Cloud Management Services team here at AWS. Very excited to talk to you about this topic of cloud compliance and assurance. Definitely, compliance is a very interesting topic for our customers. As more workloads are migrated to the cloud, customers quickly get the benefits around agility, elasticity, and experimentation, but they quickly realize they need to establish solid governance for their workloads, and that includes governance, risk, and compliance. So in this presentation, we're not going to talk about a specific service and how it works and how it solves this problem. We're going to tackle this from a use case perspective. We're going to talk about a few services and how you can combine them and understand how they work together to address this challenge. Here's the agenda that we're going to follow for our presentation today. First of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges that some customers face with compliance in the cloud. Then we're going to, after considering those challenges, we're going to talk about a very important element on this presentation, and it is this concept of the 3 lines of defense. This is very important to understand where all our different services fit into this model that's going to make compliance much easier for you. After that, we're going to spend some time diving deeper into some of the key services, and we're even going to show you a demo of how they work together to solve this problem for you. At the end, we want to review quickly some key takeaways, things you should do and follow up on to keep learning about this important topic. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that our customers face when they first start considering compliance for the cloud. One of them, as you can see, there's several of them, and there may be more. We don't pretend to cover them all, but just to give you an idea, and you may find yourself identify with some of these. One of them is the dynamic landscape. When you design workloads in the cloud, you're going to be using a number of different services with different features, and as you start adopting these services that are different in nature, different in functionality, you need to make sure that you implement good governance and you implement controls that fit your compliance frameworks that you're required to meet. So that could be challenging. Also, as you see on the second one there, volume, variety, and velocity of the different services. The speed and the scale at which resources operate in the cloud is completely different to any other infrastructure management paradigm that we've ever seen. Think about the hundreds and hundreds of instances that an auto-scaling group can spin up and terminate as your workload or as the load on your application varies. But as this is happening, you still need to make sure that as these resources are created or destroyed, that they're meeting your compliance requirements. Pace of innovation. It's another challenge sometimes customers face, is that new services are coming online all the time, new features, new options for the services. And as they are adopted by the teams using cloud infrastructure, they still need to meet compliance requirements. The global and geographic footprint of some of the workloads could also be a challenge. Also, it's important to mention the different compliance and security needs different organizations have. Some organizations may have to meet PCI DSS standards. Others may be required to meet requirements around HIPAA. These compliance frameworks are different. They have different requirements, and understanding them and how our tools can help you with that is very important. And the last one is familiarity with the cloud, right? As you start using and adopting cloud services, it could be a little bit challenging to understand how they work and what relationship there is between the different services and the controls you need to implement for cloud compliance. So there are a number of challenges, right? But they can be addressed, and we provide a lot of help for you to tackle those. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Another challenge that our customers face is there are so many services, there are so many capabilities that we offer within AWS that sometimes customers don't know which one to choose for what. When you're starting your journey on compliance, you may wonder, well, what do I pick first? Where do I start? Should I start with Control Tower? Should I go with Security Hub? How about Guard Duty? What is Config for? Do I need License Manager? And that may be a little bit challenging to understand that. And we understand you may be facing some of those questions and maybe wondering about these different capabilities. So in this presentation, we want to introduce you to a concept that's going to help put all these services together and fit them in a specific order that's going to help you understand how they can work to help you address compliance at scale. And to understand them, we like to talk about the 3 lines of defense. This is a very important concept when you talk about compliance in the cloud. The 3 lines of defense model is a model provided by the Institute of Internal Audit, and it provides guidance on organizations on how they should implement 3 lines of defense to ensure they're meeting governance, risk, and compliance requirements. The first line of defense is going to be where you implement functions that manage risk, day-to-day risk in the different components of the infrastructure. As you can see in the slide, this is where services like AWS Config, CloudTrail, Systems Manager, Control Tower, and License Manager fit in. There are other services that fit into this first line of defense. But essentially, the idea is that these services are going to help you to detect any deviation or any risk and address it quickly, and also provide you reporting and automated actions so you can take care of them. In the second line of defense, we have functions that oversee risk. These are functions that allow you to have a quick overview in a central place of the security posture of your entire organization. This is where tools like Security Hub and CloudWatch fit in, because they can give you a quick snapshot of where you're at in terms of compliance, security, in a central place, and they evaluate all your accounts in all regions. And then the third line of defense is the functions that provide assurance that you are indeed managing and mitigating risk, that you are indeed implementing the first and second line of defense. This is typically where every once in a while an auditor will come in and say, prove to me that you are indeed doing those things and following this framework. This is the line of defense where a service called Audit Manager that we introduced at reInvent 2020 fits in perfectly. And we're going to help you understand how that services connects with the other lines of defense to help you simplify the process of providing evidence for audit purposes. So let's go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into each one of these services to understand how they can help you in this journey. Let's talk first about some of the services that help you in the manage risk line of defense, the first line of defense. And the first one we want to cover briefly is AWS Config. Now you're going to notice that AWS Config is one of the key detective controls platforms for addressing and managing risk at scale. As we continue to cover other lines of defense and other services, they often tie back to config. And let me help you understand why. Now, what is AWS Config? Well, AWS Config is a service that enables you to assess, audit, and evaluate the configuration of your AWS resources automatically. So when you turn it on, every time a new resource is created or modified, we take a picture in time with the details of the configuration of that resource. We save that picture in time, and you can keep it in the system for up to 7 years. That gives you a rich history of all the configuration changes that resource has had over a period of time. This is in itself very powerful to give you a clear understanding from a security perspective of anything that could have been a risk that was introduced within your infrastructure. But on top of that, you add the powerful feature of what we call AWS Config Rules. And what AWS Config Rules allows you to do is evaluate the state of a resource against a predetermined state that you define for control purposes. Let me give you an example. For example, an S3 bucket. This is a very common use case. An S3 bucket, customers may want to make sure that no S3 bucket that is created or modified has public access enabled. Well, in order to detect that automatically, you can deploy an AWS Config Manage rule that evaluates that automatically. When you deploy that rule and activate it, every time an S3 bucket in an AWS account is created or modified, the rule triggers, checks if indeed the public access is enabled on the bucket. And if it is enabled, then it flags the resource as non-compliant. Once a resource is flagged as non-compliant, you have a number of options of how you can handle that. You can send an alarm, send a notification, or you can take an automated action. There's a very powerful feature that is part of AWS Config Rules, which is called remediation actions. And what remediation actions allows you to do is to automatically fix that resource that has gone out of compliance. This is done by using a feature of AWS Systems Manager, which we'll cover more deeply later, that allows you to design automated workflows to interact with resources in AWS. Now think about it. What this allows you to do is then deploy a number of controls, automated controls, that can all the time be detecting anything that could be risk in your infrastructure and fixing it automatically as it happens. You can also, as part of that, send notifications or create a Jira ticket and other automation tasks that will help you track what's happening from a managing risk perspective. It's also worth mentioning that AWS Config includes very powerful features around reporting, things like aggregators, which allows you to centralize the collection of data around resource and compliance. And also a feature called Advanced Query, which allows you to create very specific queries to extract key data from the resource history and compliance history of AWS Config. So as you can see, this is a key component when we talk about compliance, because it's a detective platform that can automate the process of fixing things that go out of compliance. Now, when we talk about managing risk, another very important platform to consider is CloudTrail. What is CloudTrail? CloudTrail is a service that enables governance, compliance, and operational auditing and risk auditing of your AWS account. Essentially, with CloudTrail, you can log and continuously monitor and also retain account activity related to all actions across your AWS infrastructure. Once you turn on CloudTrail, every action is tracked. A user logged in, a user launched an instance, a user deleted a bucket. All those resources actions are tracked, stored securely in an S3 bucket, and then you can review that data later for auditing purposes, for risk management purposes. You can enable CloudTrail for an entire organization in a single trail in one region and account, and collect all the information from your accounts to centralize the data collection. In addition to what we call management events, which are the standard events tracked in CloudTrail, we have data events. And data events allow you to track within CloudTrail more granular resource actions. For example, for an S3 bucket, creating the bucket and modifying bucket properties are resource management events. But what about if you wanted to track whenever somebody read a file or deleted a file? Well, for that, you can use data events. And once enabled, it'll track all the activity in a bucket. This is super important, for example, when you want to have a good trail for detecting data exfiltration, for example, or any security risk involved to data stored in S3. So where config is going to tell you that something went out of compliance, CloudTrail works very closely with config to tell you when it happened, who did it, and any other details about that action that was taken. So they work together very closely to give you a full picture of managing risk. Now let's talk about another service that's important in managing risk, and that's AWS Systems Manager. AWS Systems Manager is a very powerful platform. We're not going to cover all the features now here, but we do want to focus on some key things related to compliance. Very quickly, an overview of AWS Systems Manager. AWS Systems Manager is our operations hub. Essentially, it does three key things. It allows you to group resources that are running in AWS in a way that's meaningful to you from an operational perspective. It then, once you create those groups, allows you to visualize key data about those resources for operational purposes. And then the third thing it does is that it allows you to take automated action to respond to the insights provided by the data collected by Systems Manager. But one of the important elements of AWS Systems Manager related to compliance is Systems Manager automation. Systems Manager automation, it's a IT workflow management platform that allows you to define complex workflows that interact with the AWS platform. This is the platform that powers remediation actions, the feature that we discussed when we were talking about AWS config rules. So whenever a resource goes out of compliance, using Systems Manager automation, you can design complex workflows that fix that resource and take it back to the compliance state. Those workflows could include maybe opening a Jira ticket, sending a notification, and once the notification has been approved, because that's a feature also of Systems Manager automation, then the automation can continue and maybe fix the non-compliant resource. So you can see that this is a very important feature to allow you to automate the process of bringing back to your resources to compliance. But there's another feature that's very important in AWS Systems Manager when we talk about compliance, and that is run command and inventory, two features. Run command, what it allows you to do is extend that power of automation all the way down to the EC2 instance level. So let's say that you wanted to check or validate inside an instance that certain components meet compliance requirements. That's where you can use run command to execute automated workflows inside the instance using popular configuration management tools like Chef, Ansible, Chef Inspect. You can validate those settings and then set the state of the resource to compliant or non-compliant based on your results. You can also add to that inventory, which is a feature that allows you to collect information about the applications that are installed on the instance, collect that information, and send it back to AWS Config. What that allows you to do is then deploy config rules that validate important things related to compliance for the software that's installed in an EC2 instance. For example, let's say that you wanted to make sure that a specific software and a specific version of that software is installed on all your EC2 instances. Now you can deploy a rule that validates that using the inventory data. You can also deploy rules that make sure that a specific application is not installed on your EC2 instance. So you can see with inventory and run command, you can extend the power of compliance validation all the way down to the EC2 instance level. And that's why this is an important platform when we talk about compliance at the managed risk level, or that first line of defense. And the last service that we want to touch on when we talk about managing risk, that first line of defense, is AWS Backup. What is AWS Backup? AWS Backup enables you to centralize and automate the data protection across multiple AWS services. It offers a fully managed policy-based experience that simplifies data protection at scale. It helps you support your regulatory compliance obligations and also meet your business continuity goals. Together with AWS organizations, AWS Backup allows you to centrally deploy data protection policies and manage and govern all backup activity across your entire organization, across all your accounts and regions. This is super powerful. Managing the risk associated with protecting your data is very important, not only because you want to keep your workloads running for operational purposes, but also to meet certain compliance and regulatory frameworks. AWS Backup allows you to automate the process of ensuring your backups on platforms like Amazon Aurora, as you can see, DynamoDB, FSx, RDS, EFS, EBS, Storage Gateway, and EC2. And it's very easy. You just create a backup plan, you set up the frequency, the retention policy, you select the services that you want to be back up or the resources on the services, and it automatically takes care of that for you. Whenever you need to restore one of the services, you can go back into AWS Backup and do it very, very easily. It's also worth mentioning that once you have your backup plans created and running across your entire organization, you can use AWS Config to deploy a rule that validates that you indeed have these backup plans for key resources in your infrastructure. This allows your compliance and cybersecurity folks to make sure that requirements around certain regulatory frameworks are being followed for resources across your entire infrastructure. So now you can see how a service like AWS Backup connects to AWS Config, again, to, in an automated way, manage the risk at that first line of defense. So all these services that we have considered are very important to manage day-to-day risk associated with compliance at that first line of defense. Let's do a quick demo of automating compliance management, or that managed risk first line of defense. Let's show you a little bit of how AWS Config, together with CloudTrail and Systems Manager, puts the story together to manage one control or one specific risk. This is how the AWS Config dashboard looks. As you can see, it gives you a quick overview of all your resources and your compliance state. Now let's go to rules here, and I want to show you a rule that I have already deployed to manage a specific risk associated with someone allowing a security group to have unapproved ports. As you can see, I have deployed this rule called restricted common ports. And what this AWS config rule does is that it allows me, when I deploy it, to define certain ports that are not approved in my organization to be open. As you can see, that includes port 20, 22, 3389, 3306, and 4333. Now, once I deploy that rule, one of the powerful things that I can deploy along with it is this remediation action. As you can see here, the remediation action is pointing to an AWS Systems Manager automation document that's called AWS Disable Public Access for Security Group. We provide a large set of remediation action sample documents as part of the AWS Systems Manager automation platform that you can just leverage out of the box. This one specifically, it's very well fitted for what I'm trying to do. What I want is, if anybody adds an unapproved port, I want to automatically remove it. Now, once I deploy the remediation action, I can deploy it in two different modes. It could be fully automated, which means as soon as the non-approved change is detected, it fixes it, or you can configure it to manually be resolved. Of course, if I would have done it automatically, I couldn't even show you how it works. So for the purposes of this demo, I've set it up to manual so you can see how it works. So this is the rule. This is all the information about the rule. And as you can see down here, I have a couple of resources that are out of compliance. Let's check this first security group. Let's go ahead and open a tab here so we can take a look at it and see what's going on with it. So this security group is called SSH only, and it gives me here in the resources a little bit of a detail about this specific security group, but I'm interested in knowing what happened with it and why it went out of compliance. So I'm going to go ahead and click on resource timeline here. And on resource timeline here, I can see all the changes that have affected that resource over time. Now, as you can see here, some of those changes are coming from config, but very interestingly enough, some of them are coming from CloudTrail with a lot more detail for my investigation. As I can see here, 1049 today, it became non-compliant. Let's take a look at the configuration change that put it in non-compliant state. So it looks like it went from not having any open ports to having 3389 and port 22 open all of a sudden. Very suspicious. I wonder who did it. So if I go here to the CloudTrail event, I can see that there was an event associated with that change, and it was authorized security group ingress, and the username that did it, as you can see there, that's the username that performed that action and the time and date. If I wanted to see the full record in CloudTrail, I could just click here. It'll take me directly to the CloudTrail console and to that specific event that caused the non-compliant change. As you can see, very quickly, I've gathered all the information that I need to have a full picture on this event that caused this resource to go out of compliance. So as you can see, by combining CloudTrail, Systems Manager, I can address these issues at scale. Now, let me show you how the remediation action works. I'm going to go back here to where I found my resource. And what I want to do is I want to show you in this console here. Let me go back to the resource itself. There's a button here that I can click called Manage Resource that will take me straight to the configuration page of that resource. And now I want to validate that indeed that resource is still out of compliance. Those ports are open. I'm going to leave it there to show you how the remediation action works. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go back to the resource here. And as you can see, remediate is available now because I have a remediation action available. I'm going to click on it. And what's going to happen is that immediately as I click on it, config is going to trigger AWS System Manager automation that I have defined to go and execute that action and remove those ports that are not approved. It looks like it completed. So let's go back to the EC2 Management Console. Let's refresh it and see the results. As you can see, the rules or the ports have been removed. And that's what we want, a fully automated mechanism to address non-compliant resources. So now let's talk about that second line of defense. We've covered quite well the first line. Now on that second line of defense, like I mentioned before, we have the services that allow you to oversee risks for your entire organization. It gives you a central location where you can have a quick snapshot of everything that's happening across your entire organization in terms of security and compliance. And one of the important services for that we provide is Security Hub. Now, what is Security Hub? Security Hub gives you a comprehensive view of your security alerts and security posture across all your AWS accounts and all your regions. With Security Hub, you have a single place that aggregates, organizes, and prioritizes all your security alerts, your findings from multiple AWS services. It collects all that data, as you can see on the slide, from services like Guard Duty, Macie, Inspector, Firewall Manager, IAM Access Analyzer, even partner solutions. And also, not shown in the slide, but CloudTrail and Config are core components of the data that Security Hub collects to give you that overview. When those checks are executed, you can take action on these security findings by investigating them with Amazon Detective, which is another service that is very important in this story. You can trigger CloudWatch event rules to send notifications or maybe trigger actions to open a ticket so that somebody can follow up on them. So by tying all these services together, you can simplify the process of having a centralized view of your entire security posture. Now, let's do a quick demo on continuous oversight of risk with Security Hub. I'm going to show you how it looks, how you configure it, and we'll do a quick overview. All right, here we go. So let's do a quick demo of Security Hub. As we mentioned, Security Hub is one of those key platforms that's going to help you address that second line of defense where you are overseeing risk across your entire organization. This is how the Security Hub console looks. When you come into the console, you would get a summary of where you are at in terms of your security posture. Depending on which security standards you've enabled, you would get information about what are some of the insights that Security Hub found that you should look into. So for example, here we have resources with the most findings, S3 bucket with public write or read permissions. There are none, which is good. So these are some key insights that we want to draw your attention to or that are important when we talk in terms of security. And then we also have here in the summary window some of the latest findings based on the different integrations that we have in Security Hub. We also have the score based on the security standards that we have enabled. What is our security score right now? As you can see, this account here is in big trouble, right? We have a 43%, which is really bad. But this number is derived from the amount of control sets that we have enabled for each of our standards and their score right now. So as you can see, we have 2 standards enabled, CIS, AWS Foundation Benchmark, and AWS Foundational Security Best Practices. And I can see here how many controls have passed, how many have failed. This gives me quick access to see where I am in terms of compliance. This is some of the resources with most failed checks. So as you can see, pretty comprehensive dashboard of all the important things, again, across your entire organization that you may be interested to assess your security posture. Now, how does this work? How does this data is collected? Well, the first thing you do when you start Security Hub is you enable, when you first set it up, is you enable some of our security standards. As you can see on the screen, on the security standard screen, which I click now, there are 3 right now available. Our goal is to continue expanding the number of security standards. But we have CIS Foundational Best Practices, Foundational Benchmarks, and AWS Foundational Security Best Practices. And we have PCI DSS here, which I have not enabled. I only have these 2 enabled. Right? But this is where I would go as new security standards are made available, and I can enable them. I get a score based on each one. I could disable some of these security standards. So these security standards, another thing I want to call out before I go to insights is findings. So these security standards are made up of control definitions, um, and those controls definitions can detect issues or um, um, surface findings, essentially. And as you can see, here's a list of all the findings that I have enabled on my account. These are coming from the security standards that I have enabled. If I go to one of those findings, for example, this one here, I can get more information about it, the description of it, the finding ID, and all kinds of pretty good information about the resources that are affected and when it happened and all that. So these insights is what surfaces, again, any issues that might have been detected in my organization related to security. Now we have also this concept of insights, and what insights is, it's a safe filter that show you related findings. So it's like a query of data that combined gives you important insight related to security. So for example, AMIs that have generated the most findings, and you have 7 here, and this is an aggregation of multiple controls that are defined. EC2 instances involving known tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? And there's 19 current here. So what we do is we take a number of those control definitions or those findings, and we aggregate it to produce those insights, which are also very powerful to give you a very good understanding of where you are in terms of security. The other thing I would like to call out here is integrations. So integrations basically shows you where is Security Hub collecting data from. And as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, we collect data from a number of resources, a number of platforms like Firewall Manager, IAM Access Analyzer, Patch Manager. But as you can see here, this is the interesting thing. We also accept findings from some of our partner applications, which can further enrich and enhance the collection of data that you have in Security Hub. This is also a very important thing to understand. And if I had, for example, one of these partner solutions enabled, I could just click Accept Findings, and the data will be directed to Security Hub so that you can have it all in one place. Let me show you a little bit of the configuration settings that you have access to. I think this is very important. Here's what I could add other accounts that I wanted to track centrally on this account in Security Hub. The other thing I want to call out is that Security Hub does support AWS organizations. And if you click on this link, it will give you more information about how that is set up. But if you have your accounts in an organization setup, it will be very easy to integrate it with that. Custom Actions gives you the ability to react on findings by using CloudWatch events. And this would allow you to, when something is detected, an issue is detected, open a Jira ticket, run some automation to page somebody, or even remediate the issue if you wanted to do so. So this extends the power of Security Hub to allow you to react to anything that happens. The usage tab here is actually pretty interesting. It gives you an idea of how much Security Hub is costing you based on the data that is gathering. So this is also a very good thing to keep in mind where you can go so that you can have a clear understanding of cost. And here is where you would, if interested in setting up delegated administration for Security Hub in an organizational setting, this is where you would enter that information. And we have other settings that can be configured here. But as you can see, Security Hub gives you a lot of flexibility, again, to have that central place where you can collect, aggregate, and react to all the security data across your entire organization. All right, now let's talk about that third line of defense. Now, once you have established your managed risk, first line of defense, once you have established your second line of defense, the third line of defense is where you have to provide auditors assurance that you indeed have implemented those. Now, it's important to say at this point that the fact that we cover the 3 lines of defense doesn't necessarily mean that you need to deploy them all at the same time. This is a journey, but helping you see where each service fits will help you lay out a plan of how you're going to implement them. Most customers start with the first line of defense and manage risk, and they progress as they mature on the compliance journey. But that third line of defense, it's a very important one, because at some point, in most organizations, there's going to be an auditor knocking and saying, okay, prove to me, give me the paperwork that shows that you're indeed doing all this. And now this is where Audit Manager, a service that we release at reInvent 2020, comes and helps. What is Audit Manager? Well, Audit Manager helps you to continuously audit your AWS usage to simplify how you assess risk and compliance with regulation and industry standards. It automates the process of collecting evidence to reduce that all hands on deck manual effort that often happens for audits. And then it also enables you to scale the capability as your business grows. With Audit Manager, it's easy to assess if your policies, procedures, and activities, in other words, controls, if they're operating effectively. So then when it's time for an audit, Audit Manager helps you to manage stakeholder reviews, the controls, and enables you to build auditor-ready reports with much less effort. So how does it work? Well, the way it works is that, as you can see on the slide, you basically deploy what we call a framework. You can also select from pre-built frameworks that we provide based on the most common compliance frameworks in the industry. You can define your own custom frameworks. And once you select your framework, you define the scope of the assessment. Defining the scope of the assessment means that you decide which accounts are going to come under review and what resources under those accounts are going to come under review. Once you define that, the assessment is activated. And once you activate it, it starts continuously gathering evidence about all those resources that you are covering for that assessment. Once the assessment is completed, at any point in time, you can go ahead and generate audit-ready reports that prove where you're at in terms of managing risk based on the framework that you selected. Let me quickly show you how that works on a demo. So here's how the console of Audit Manager looks once you launch it. When you launch it for the first time, you're going to be walked through the process of enabling it. But let me walk you through the different components of it so you can understand how it works. The most fundamental element of a Audit Manager is a control. And there are a number of controls that we include in the frameworks that are pre-built into the Audit Manager platform. In this case, we are looking at the controls that I've deployed already in this account. But a control is essentially a one specific check that is done based on a control that is provided by that framework. That could be that, as you can see here, that you're using domain authentication. Let me look for one that is automatic. Audit filtering actions. As you can see here, the data is provided by AWS Config. So if I click on it, I can see the details of this specific control. I can see what the data source is. It gives me information about the name, the type of control, the description. When transferring information between different security domains, record and audit content filtering actions and results of the information being filtered. And the data or the source for that is AWS Config and a specific rule called AWS WAF enabled. So this makes sure that you have web application firewall enabled. That rule is being deployed in AWS Config, and Audit Manager has gathered evidence that this is indeed being done. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. So once you have your controls, then you have your framework. The different frameworks that we include in the platform are listed here. These are the standard frameworks. You can also create your own frameworks. Essentially, creating a framework is just giving it a name, my framework, entering what type of compliance, you can type whatever you want here in description. And then after that, you basically set a control set. A control set is a collection of controls. Control set 1, let me just call it. The control types, if our standard controls that we include in the platform, they're going to come up here and you can select them. Or if you want to use your own custom controls that you have created. In this case, I don't have any custom controls, but I have the option of creating my own custom controls. So once I have my framework, if it's a custom framework, I can deploy it, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. But I just wanted to show you a little bit of how you can create your own custom frameworks. But like I said, we provide a large set of some of the standard frameworks that most customers need. Now, once my framework I have my custom framework, or I'm just going to use my standard framework, I can create an assessment, right? And the assessment is the mechanism where I'm going to start gathering evidence based on that framework and based on those controls that are part of that framework. So I'm going to call this test. And I'm going to select a specific, you see all the different frameworks here that are available, some of the standard frameworks that are common in the industry. I'm going to select that one. I'm going to click next. And I think I didn't select the bucket where I'm going to deliver the results. This is something very important. So let's just select a bucket and let's click next. And here is where I select the accounts that will be in scope for this specific assessment. In this case, for this account, I only have one account. In an organizational setting, I will have the option of adding more accounts. And then after I select the account, I will select the services that are going to be part of that assessment. So let me just pick a couple of ones. And then after that, I click next. And then now I can select audit owners. These are individuals in the AWS account, IAM users or roles that I am going to delegate the ability of having permissions to the audit. So I'm not going to select anybody. Oh, I must include somebody. Forgot about that. I am going to click next. And then after that, my assessment can be created. Now I already have an assessment here. It's called my SOC 2 assessment. And once the assessment has executed, which takes quite a bit of time, so you have to, after you run it, you have to let it run for some time. Then I'll have what you see here. I'll have all the results with how much evidence has been collected, the details of the control, which ones of them have been reviewed, which have evidence. As you can see, I have one here with evidence, and I can go and dig deeper into the evidence and see what has been collected, the evidence folder, where it came from for the different controls. Some of them came from Security Hub, some of them came from Config. Now, once my assessment is ready, I can generate a report. And I can click here, it'll generate the report, and there's a couple of reports here, but once generated, I can then take that report and download it. And the report is going to include the results of the assessment, and it's going to in a PDF format, and it's going to include also the evidence. Then I can take that information and provide it to my auditor. So as you can see, the platform gives you a lot of flexibility on determining what to check, what data sources to use, and then provide you the ability of reporting. Now, this is running all the time so that when you need those reports for audit purposes, you can provide them quickly. So we've shown you a little bit of the 3 lines of defense. Let's talk about some key takeaways now. How these different services work, how you can combine them, how they are related to each other to complete the picture around compliance and assurance at scale. We want you to take away these 3 points as you continue your journey of compliance. First, remember the 3 lines of defense. The 3 lines of defense are going to help you identify the right AWS service for the right job you're trying to accomplish in terms of compliance. Second, data protection is super important. That's why we covered AWS Backup as part of our presentation. Take advantage of services like that, and take advantage also of the ability of services like Config to make sure that you indeed have data protection enabled in your organization. And the third point is, hopefully we've shown you the art of the possible. We've shown you how combining these services can help you mitigate risk, automate the process of handling risk, reporting on it, and then even providing audit reports. So when you indeed need them with services like Audit Manager. So what are the next steps? What should you do next? Well, continue learning about these services. This was just a quick overview of how these services work. We encourage you to dive deeper into each one of them, learn more about the different features of Config, Systems Manager, CloudTrail, Security Hub, and Audit Manager, and other services that are important in those three lines of defense. Browse the blog. Number two, we have a lot of resources to help you understand better different use cases for these services. There's a lot of blogs. We encourage you to go out and look for them and take advantage of that resource. And number three, talk to your account team. Yes, reach out to the AWS account team. They can help a lot, give you guidance on how to use these different services, ask questions so that you can further simplify this important journey through compliance in the cloud. That's it. Thank you very much for watching and sharing this presentation with me. We hope that you learn a lot about how to address cloud compliance and assurance at scale.